This is where the Scots came to have it out once and for all with King Henry VIII of England, who was being his usual troublesome self. Thousands of clansmen came this way across the border for the showdown. But quite frankly, they were a disorganized army, and there was plague among the ranks. The outcome was a disastrous defeat for the Scots, with the loss of about 10,000 lives. Among them, their leader, James Stewart, James IV of Scotland. Now, nobody knows for certain exactly how James died or what happened to his body. But if you believe the astounding claims of this woman, the fact is that James was hacked to pieces by the billhooks of English soldiers. Mrs. A.J. Stewart says that she is James IV, reincarnated, and that she remembers not only his life, but the gruesome details of his death here on Flodden Field.
There's the Falcon battle stand of 1513, and I felt when we went on the march into England that we needed something more than the sovereign's banner, and in a way something more than the flag of Scotland. We needed something that was personal to all of us. It seized the imagination of everybody in a most extraordinary way in 1513, and we found it scratched in the mud and scratched on walls and scratched everywhere like that with the two pinions. And it was simply everybody who felt themselves to be Scotland had seized upon that and left it as their mark. And it is the last thing that I remember before I was killed, as I was reeling back, looking up, and this impression upon my eyes.
Now, we've all at least heard about odd people who think they're somebody else, like the man who imagines that he's Napoleon, or the woman who's convinced that she's Cleopatra. But there are aspects about this case which make it more compelling, and fantastic though it may seem, even credible. Mrs. Stewart's written a book about the life of James IV. It's not a biography, it's an autobiography. Edinburgh's changed a good deal since the days of James IV. So when she feels drawn to the past, she has to go to Linlithgow, where, as King of Scotland, she spent, she says, the happiest times in the 16th century.
I came here knowing that the palace would be a shell, and I came to see how accurate was my memory of it. The shell I was expecting, but I looked at the fountain, and where had been the crisp cut stone, it was all weathered. And I had the most terrible shock there, because I realized that my memory had lasted longer than stone. And I can remember on my first visit to Linlithgow, the forlornness. Oh, to me this is a happy place, and I see it yet like that. I stand on a turret and look down on my favorite walk, the rooftop catwalk, where I used to think so much and where so much of Scotland's foreign policy was worked out, because this was a place where I could get away from everybody.
What are your feelings about your contemporaries at that time? An obvious one is Henry VIII, of course.
Well, the worst scoundrel ever to sit upon a throne. And I feel now, as I felt then, but I feel more strongly, because since that time we have seen the consequences of Europe selling out to Henry Tudor and the Medici and the Venetians. And I think if you ask me about Henry VIII, I would say, well, the worst thing that happened in Europe, bar Adolf Hitler, who was his natural successor.
You obviously do feel extremely angry about that. Angry
Yes.
is too weak a word.
Yes, because we went to Branxton Moor to save the peace of Europe. And at that point in time, we could have saved it and everybody was with us. And one silly, stupid, strutting lout with too much money and a juvenile addiction to his own pomp and circumstance went to war to pirouette on a horse outside Terouenne for self-glorification. It lost us a nation on Branxton Moor, and it lost us the peace of Europe ever after. And they're fighting now for a common market in economic terms. What we threw away was Christendom, which mattered a damn sight more.
AJ's case has puzzled a lot of people, not least an authority on Scottish kings, Professor Gordon Donaldson.
I think she's made quite a valuable contribution to Scottish history, because I've always been of the opinion that however much work one may do by way of research on original documents and so on, there still is room for a certain amount of imagination, a certain amount of intuition, if you like, and this I think she has brought to bear on the reign of James IV.
Are there any glaring historical mistakes, would you say, in the book?
There are a considerable number of mistakes, and they're mostly precisely the kind of errors which I constantly find in things about Scotland which have been written by people who are not familiar with the Scottish scene.
But you use the word intuition. Where do you think she gets it if she's not James IV?
Oh, imagination. One can do a great deal from imagination. One should say that for James IV, there's a vast amount of authentic information available. We know far more about James IV, his personal life, his day-to-day life, the life of his court and so on, far more about his life than we do about the life of any earlier Scottish king. This almost makes me wish that she had chosen some king we don't know so much about to have her intuitions about. They would have been much more useful.
But has she thrown up things which nobody had considered previously?
So far as I'm aware, she has. And here I think the value of her book lies. For example, the suggestion that James III was a homosexual. No one, so far as I know, has suggested this before. It's possible, and if it's true, it would explain some of the mysteries about that very enigmatic monarch and that very enigmatic reign.
But putting it at its lowest, the book does give food for thought, doesn't it?
Oh, certainly it does. And I'm sure that any historian in the future would be wise to take account of the suggestions she's made.
I see it just as it was. You see, here I don't see a ruin. I see life still going on, just as it was.